Hello, my name is Kenzie and welcome to this watercolor tutorial. If you would like this sketch, you can go down below to the description, click the link that will take you to my website, and you can have the sketch to follow along so you can just focus on the painting part. Let's get started. So this right here is my Winsor Newton watercolor paints that I have taken from the tube and put it inside this palette that I got off of Amazon. I have a tapping cloth right here. It's always good to have one. That way you don't have excess water on your page. I also have my two water cups right here. One I use for cool paints and one I use for my warmer paint colors. I also have right here my dryer. I like to use this to speed up the process between layers. These are the brushes that I use. These are the silver black velvet. I have size 12, 4, and 8, and these are the round tip brushes. I'm using this painting as an example. I always like to have painter's tape on hand. I like to paint down my paintings. It's easier to one, film, and to also just keep everything from moving around and it getting a little messy. It also helps to protect your desk, which you'll see mine is very worn, so it definitely does help with that. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is do that wet on wet technique. So I'm going to come in here with some water and I'm going to apply it into my acorn. I'm going to try and stay within my lines. Now you don't want this absolutely dripping wet, but you want to put a decent amount of water down. That way your colors will bleed and blend. And then I'm going to mix up some nice different tones here. I'm going to mix in a little bit of yellow, some cadmium yellow, with some burnt umber. So you're going to see here, I'm going to put my darker side on this side of my painting. And I'm going to try and leave a bit of white space, which is just negative space in your page. So right here, because it's going to be my light source. So I have just water on my brush right now, so I'm just coming in and just helping that spread and blend out right here from my light source. And then I'm going to come in and grab a little bit more of that darker brown. I'm going to add it to the different sides and do the wet on wet technique, which is basically just having a wet surface onto another wet surface right here. That creates nice soft blends within our painting. I'm going to put a little bit of darkness just underneath a little acorn part right there. I'm going to also add a little bit of red into my browns. I'm going to add this to it. And this is what I would consider a nice first layer. I'm going to let this dry. But you'll see the most important thing that you should have is basically 3 grounds is what I like to say. So you like to have your lightest part right here, which is the light that's hitting it. You want to have a medium zone, which is on this side and then right over here, and then your darkest part right here. So I'm going to let this dry before I do any other details. I'm going to repeat what I just did as well on this side of my acorns. This is good practice. So I'm going to apply some nice fresh water. You're going to do the wet on wet technique when you have a wet surface, and you're going to paint another wet surface on top, making sure it's not too wet. I'm going to mix a little bit of yellow, like a sandy yellow right here, and my brown. My light source is right here, so my light is going to hit it around here. So right here on this side is going to be consistent with my darkness on this side. So this is going to be my darker part. Bringing it in on this side as well. And because this one is further away, I'm going to have my light source be a little bit smaller than my other side. I'm going to get rid of everything on my brush to just kind of help blend out that area. I'm going to come in and grab a little bit of that red. I thought that was really pretty, a little bit more brown. And I'm going to touch my edges with it. touching underneath. And I'm also going to let that dry as well. Again, I have my first light, I have my medium, and then I have my darkest part right there as well. So the same as right on this part. So we can do the very similar technique with our leaf as well. You just have to move fairly quickly. So I'm going to use my biggest brush that I have, which is my size 12. And I'm going to just do the wet on wet technique with this one as well. So I'm going to really quickly come in. If you go too slow and you don't have enough water, then your paper is just going to dry. You're not going to get this nice soft blend effect. So make sure that you're going at a decent speed. You have a decent amount of water, not to the point where it's dripping off the page, but a good amount. Trying to stay within your lines here. Okay, that's probably just good enough. Just bring it all the way around. So I'm going to come in. I already had some green in my palette already. I'm going to come in with some sap green. I love mixing in cadmium red. Yeah, this is a really pretty fall color. Some hooker's green. And I'm just going to start applying this color. Now, because this is fall, I do want to introduce a little bit of that acorn color that we have had down on my palette and introduce that as well. Make use of the colors that we have. Maybe add a little bit more red, so there's some darker tones in here. And just let those colors blend into each other. And I'm going to try to get a little bit more darkness towards the bottom. There we go. And I'm going to bring this all the way down. And I'm just going to bring it up. And you'll notice that I'm going very light over here as well. It's not super, super green. I'm going to be leaving some white space as well. And that's going to be my first layer of my stems right here and my leaf. So I do have a dryer right here that I'm going to use just to speed up the process so we can get to the other part of the painting. If you don't have this, I would definitely let your painting dry. Otherwise, everything you put down is going to bleed and blend and not give you the results that you're looking for. So I'm going to dry this now. Okay, this is now dry, so I can move on to this area right here of my acorn. So the same thing as before, I want to come in and do the wet on wet technique. So make sure my brush is clean before I come down. And this time on the top, I'm going to do more of a transparent brown. So I'm just going to have a little bit more water inside of my color. So I'm just going to use this part right here. It already has a bit of a gray in here. I'm going to try and scoop out with my palette. So I'm going to grab this brown. Mixing up a nice brown color that I like. Add a little bit of red into there. And a lot of water. Okay. So now I'm going to come in and the same thing as before. I want there to be a light source, and I'm going to have the light source be more towards the middle part, and then this part will be darker. I can already tell my painting is starting to dry. I should have mixed up my color before. That's all right. So I'm going to come in, making sure I'm leaving my light source. I'm going to come in with just water and just blend out this part that was already pretty dry. I'm going to come in with a little bit more darkness up here and towards the bottom, letting it blend. Making sure I'm still leaving my light source, my medium zone, and my darker zone. And then I'm going to bring this brown up over top of my green. This is what you call underpainting, when you let that color be your first layer, because it will always kind of shine through, and this will just give your stem a little bit more of an effect. So bringing this color up. Okay, and I'm going to do the same on this side. Get rid of everything on my brush, tap my napkin, putting down some water. My water cup's already a little muggy, so is my water right now. It's not exactly clear, but that's okay. I'm gonna pull in my color, and this time, because this one's a little angled away, I'm gonna have my light source be more towards over here versus the middle. I'm going to come in and tap different areas. And I can see here, I didn't leave as big of a white space as I wanted to, so I'm going to come in here with a smaller brush and kind of just scoop up a little bit so I can have three zones. I do want to add a little bit more darkness towards the edge over here, because it is going to be my further away point. I'll do that over here as well, just add a little bit more darkness. Okay, I'm gonna dry this part again as well. Okay, we have done it. We have got all of our first layers down on everything, and now we can go in with the wet on dry technique, which is where we're gonna be layering paint onto a dry surface, and this is how you create depth and dimension within your watercolor piece. So you're gonna see that whenever I put a color down, it's just gonna sit over top of your painting, which is exactly what we want. So I'm gonna come in with a darker acorn color. I felt that my color a little bit more saturated, and I want to work towards my darker color, and you'll see here it just sits on top. There's no soft blending or bleeding or anything happening. Now this can be the part of watercolor that a lot of people can struggle with. They like how their first layer is, they're afraid that they're gonna ruin it, but this is when I just say go for it. This is how you learn and you grow with watercolor. It's just by putting different layers down on your painting. So I'm going in here with a mix of a color and honestly a bit of water as well, just because with how my style of painting is, I really don't like seeing my harsh lines. It really throws me off. So I typically do probably a little bit more layering than, I don't know, maybe some other people out there, but that's because I just really don't enjoy looking at harsh lines. So I'm gonna come in here. I just included the acorn color, the top part of it as well. So different shades of darkness. I also want to add a little bit more depth and dimension right underneath the top here. And I'm using the very tip of my brush and trying to just do like strokes coming down. If you're finding that your color is just standing out too much, just break it down by just using a little bit of water. So obviously when I'm shadowing around my light source, I'm using a lot more water than I am when I'm coming over here, for example. I'm using a lot more color. I'm gonna break up this line. It's annoying me. There we go. Really focusing under here right now. Add a little bit more yellow in here. There we go. That way it's just not too close to. Okay, so I've done a lot of layering here with the wet on dry technique that it's turning into the wet on dry technique. So I'm gonna let these dry before I want to come in and probably just do one more layer. But you can already tell there's been some big changes here. My dark is just a little bit more dark. So now I'm gonna move on to this little part right here. And I'm just gonna come in and just do little C shapes. I'm using the very tip of my brush. And as I get closer to my light source, I'm going to add a little bit more water onto my brush and just have it be a little bit lighter of paint. A little bit lighter of paint, a little bit less paint on my brush. Sometimes I get too focused on what I'm painting, I forget what I'm actually saying. I want to add just like a little bit more, like a yellow touch on my acorn just to kind of break up that brown. Just adding different shades onto here as well. I'm going to add that yellow first over here before I add my little lines. Maybe a little bit of red too might be nice. Just kind of introducing, playing around with different colors. Okay, I'm pretty happy with this. So you'll see I did a lot of wet on dry technique up here. I've done like little C shapes. I've introduced kind of the same over here. I just didn't go quite as detailed as I had over here, but I will come in with darker brown and do that. I want to just spend a little bit more time here on my branch. So I'm just adding a little bit of wet on dry over here. Gotta add a little bit more darkness and let that dry. So you can be as detailed, honestly, as you kind of want to be. This is just fun practice getting familiar with what your colors do when they blend, whether it's wet or dry on the page. Just having fun with this process of trying to just build up layers and paint somewhat of a realistic acorn and leaf. Okay, so moving on to the second layer of my leaf. So I want to come in with a second layer because I want my leaves to be a little bit more vibrant. If you don't want to do this part, you can definitely just skip it. I just not loving how it's sitting with me. So I'm gonna come in into a second layer and I'm just gonna put water literally over top it again. And I'm gonna do this technique again. But you can definitely skip over this part. I want it to make more of a statement, and I feel like it's lacking that. So I'm going to add a little bit more cadmium red. And I'm going to come in and just touch my edges and let this color bleed into the color that I already have down. Come in with a little bit more orange over here. I just added a little bit more yellow. I'm gonna leave the center green. I like that there is green, but as I drift down closer towards my branch, I do want there to be a little bit more of a vibrant green. And I just feel like this is just not cutting it. I'm gonna add a little bit of indigo into my green as I head down towards the bottom. I'm gonna introduce this green a little bit into the red, let that blend out. And then I'm gonna blend this color out into my center. And then I'm just gonna use some water, just blend all these colors. Kind of mixing the colors on the page. Okay, I feel like that's more of a statement. That's kind of the color that I was envisioning. So I'm gonna dry this. Okay, so using my small brush again, I'm gonna come in and I hate this part. I don't like doing the veins, but here we go. I'm gonna come in. See, I don't like it. I don't like that color. I'm gonna change it into a slightly less vibrant green. And I got a lot of water here. I still feel like this is just too dark, so I'm just adding a little bit more water again just to soften the effect, especially down the middle when it was already supposed to be really soft. Add a little bit more pigment here to get towards the darker part. And then I'm going to come up and add the little veins. I'm using the very tip of my brush. I'm even using my pinky right here to kind of prop me up. So it's very important that your acorn is dry, otherwise you will have a lot of smudging. And I'm going to come down and kind of do a double line almost around the center. Really close. using some water to blend out that line. Okay, so I do want to add a little bit more depth to my acorn. This is going to be my last layer. So I'm going to come in with some depth. So I'm going to come right underneath my little acorn right in here. You can already tell now there's a nice separation. I'm going to grab some water and I'm going to blend this out so that there's no harsh lines. I'm going to pull down this color and just kind of straighten up my lines around here. I did a really bad job at keeping those lines nice and straight. Pulling in this brown color and just creating some texture on the acorn, using a little bit more water here. Coming in again with that darker color on this acorn. Using some water to blend out this line, pulling down this color to give your acorn some nice texture. And there's also a little bit of shadow right here that I didn't emphasize before, so I'm just going to add a little bit of darkness right under here. That way that can stand out, this part of the acorn can stand out. Okay, so coming back into the top of the acorn, I'm going to again, that's a little too dark, some darkness. Doing that C shape over and over again. I'm gonna add a little bit more water. I'm gonna break up this darker one over here so it's not as detailed. So the objects that are in the back should be definitely a lot less detailed than the one in the front. It's not supposed to take your focus too much. So definitely put a little bit of detail and love, but not a lot. And again, I'm just going to add a little bit more depth just underneath there. And I want to add a little bit of depth right in here. Okay. And just deepening this line right here as well. Towards the corners. Okay, there you have it. This is a beginner-friendly watercolor acorn and leaf piece. If you have enjoyed this video, please go check out other videos that I have. I'm just gonna blend out this line really quick. There you go. Go check out my other videos that I have. You can also check out my website for more sketches as well. Happy painting, friends.